Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn your flight into fight so that you can master yourself, conquer your goals, and live on the front line of your life. My name is Mark Weppett, and I am here to help you sharpen your masculine edge so you can cut through the resistance that's holding you back from being a man that you admire. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about ego. In some instances, people have an overinflated ego. In some cases, people have an underinflated ego. Either side is going to get in your way. It's going to prevent you from making the kind of progress that you want in your life. And chances are you may not even be able to see this. You kind of need maybe someone to point it out, or just, have a video like this to help you analyze yourself, because I've been on both sides of this, and learning how to properly adjust your ego using the right kinds of perspective can allow you to make much more rapid and effective progress in becoming that man that you really want to be. All right, so in order to start this off, we should probably talk about what the ego is. The way that I'm looking at it here is that your ego is basically your conception of yourself. It's the story that you tell about who you are. And people get confused about ego. They think, oh, having an ego is bad, because particularly the Eastern traditions, they're dedicated to overcoming or transcending the ego. And I don't know if I really buy that. I think you need an ego. You need to have a conception of yourself, because that's basically what you use to interact with the world. You need to have some idea of who you are so that you know how to show up and interact, right? Like if I'm talking to someone and I'm trying to communicate something to them, I need to know who I am, where I stand, what I want, all this kind of stuff. All that's kind of wrapped up in your ego. Now, if that perception of yourself is distorted, well, then that's going to throw off the whole interaction with other people, with your goals, with yourself, all that kind of stuff. So learning how to adjust your ego is incredibly important. So let's start by looking at the deflated ego, okay? And what that means is that your conception of yourself is too small. And what that does then, in turn, is make everything in relation to you seem too big. And so the person with a chronically underinflated ego sees everything as too hard, too big, and not dealing with it, okay? And so if we're going to metaphorically understand problems as monsters or enemies or something like that have to be overcome, then the person with the deflated ego, they view their strategy is to usually just hide underneath the covers and hope it goes away. And honestly, that's a terrible strategy for dealing with most issues in life. But if you view yourself as this weak, incompetent person, well, then that's what you're going to do. You're just going to run away from things. You're going to be afraid to look at them. You're going to be afraid to address them. And obviously, that's just not going to lead you anywhere useful. So for example, this is the person who has an addiction. They recognize that this addiction, it's a big monster in their life. It's causing them lots of problems, but maybe they've tried, or even the thought of trying, it just seems too hard. It's too big. It's too challenging. And so they just kind of don't look at it. They don't address it. And, maybe in the back of their mind, they're telling themselves, hey, it won't always be this way, or hey, maybe it'll take care of itself, but it doesn't do that, right? Another example would be the person who hates the job that they're living, or hates the job that they're doing. It's a dead-end job, drains them, makes them hate their life, but the prospect of trying to figure out what they should be doing instead seems way too big, way too outside of their scope, and so, they just ignore it, and they continue to play small and live in an unsatisfying way. So the perspective that I've found with myself that has helped me overcome the small kind of ego is learning how to look at my life through an epic lens. Epic, okay? Meaning like learning how to look at your life as a serious, meaningful journey. And because here's the thing, your life is dramatic. You might be like, no, Mark, my life's super boring. No, your life's dramatic because literally your life is in the balance, right? Your life is at stake. Maybe not in a practical, like immediate sense of like, oh, you're going to die if you do this or not. I mean, depending on the severity, if you've got a bad addiction, then maybe your life literally is in the balance. But in general, the quality of your life, the direction, all that kind of stuff is at stake. And so, automatically your life is dramatic. And the key to making that drama something that you can step into is to give it meaning, make it meaningful, and look at it as an epic story. And I think this is where art and literature and movies and all this kind of stuff is really beneficial, because you can then apply that lens to your life. So for example, all right, like Luke Skywalker, he transformed from this backworld nobody into this master Jedi through his confrontation with, Darth Vader and, the dark side and all that kind of stuff. Okay. And another example would be popular one would be like Harry Potter. Okay. You went from this abused orphan to hero of the wizarding world by confronting Voldemort. Right. And then, my favorite, you've got Sam Gamgee, this little, country bumpkin hobbit from the Shire, who ends up being one of the biggest badasses of Middle Earth, who can, slay orcs and giant spiders and, all that kind of stuff by confronting the burden of the ring and of his master Frodo, right? And so, we've all got stuff. We've all got challenges, and you have to give them the respect that it's due and learn how to see it as like, all right, this is your epic struggle here, and give yourself permission to engage in that struggle and let it be meaningful and let yourself be tried and challenged, because any real drama, any real epic story has epic lows and epic challenges and epic defeats and all that kind of stuff. Like the hero, if a hero just like waltzes through everything and has no struggle, has no challenge, guess what? That's a boring ass story. The reason why it's boring is because it's unrealistic. It's unhelpful. It's just not true in really any way. And so if you learn how to look at your problems as opportunities for transformation to go from this nobody to this hero, well, that puts a different spin on things. And maybe it'll put a little, give you a little backbone, a little drive to actually confront that monster when you realize, oh, wow, it's through the confrontation of that thing that is going to give me access to my own heroic transformation so that I can actually be the hero of my own life. Because whether you like it or not, no one else can be the hero of your own life. It only can be you. And so if you decide to accept that burden of responsibility so that you can tell a good and meaningful story in your life, well, I think that is the best way to overcome a chronically deflated ego, okay, is to learn how to be like, yeah, I can be the hero of this story, and I'm going to actually try and be a good hero, and I'm going to be willing to go through that whole hero's journey arc. You can look up the hero's journey and understand essentially what you're in store for, but that's basically the process of transformation. That's the process of going from, a disintegrated, non-thriving state to, a self-controlled, integrated, aligned individual. We got to go through this process. And so if you look at your life as this big epic story, well, that can really help. Now, that's not the only side of things, okay? So on some cases, the issue is that our ego is too big, meaning that our perception of ourself is relatively too large to properly address the things that we're encountering. So this is the person who has a rather high opinion of themselves. And because of this, they're too caught up in their own epic story to actually address the smaller things, the quote unquote smaller things in their life. And so, I'll tell you how this is manifested for me. Like every once in a while, I'll be struggling with something that I feel like is beneath me because I'm beyond this little thing. It's trivial, and I just try to brush it aside, but then it keeps coming back, and I keep trying to brush it aside, and then it trips me, and I keep trying to brush it aside, and then it causes major meltdown and problems and chaos in my life because I was too proud to give it its due. Okay, I was too caught up in my own epic story, and so I needed to bring myself down a peg or two. Okay, and so it's really tied up in a lot of self-judgment. It's the idea that oh wow, if this small thing is a problem for me, well then that says something bad about me. It says, I'm not good enough or whatever. Usually that's kind of something at the core of it. And I've definitely struggled more with the inflated ego problems than probably the deflated ones, because that's, the way that I tend to go. I tend to, I think everyone kind of has a way in which they tend to lean. I think most people will encounter both kinds of problems in their life, but, I tend to lean more toward being a little overinflated than, deflated. Some people, it's the complete opposite. So for the person who tends to err on that side, I think instead of looking to Luke Skywalker or superheroes or whatever, you're better off looking to Jerry Seinfeld, all right? the show about nothing, right? If you ever watch Seinfeld, it's it takes these little mundane problems and really tells very interesting stories about them. I think comedy is very useful for someone who tends to be a little bit full of themselves, because through laughing at yourself, you can kind of gently, sometimes brutally, but I guess more bearably deflate your own ego. So, I'm trying to think of an example. Like, if you think of a lot of the modern DC superhero movies, like Justice League and that kind of stuff, like, they're kind of stilted. They're like too up on their high horse. There's no laughter, there's no fun in them. And because of that, they just take themselves way too seriously, and it just ends up being this like bland affair that misses the mark because it misses the little things. And I think that that there's that temptation inside of us. There's that temptation to maybe miss the little things and see the value in them. And so when you find yourself dealing with a little problem, I think adopting this mentality of kind of humor and playfulness and interest is really, really valuable, because it allows you to kind of laugh at yourself and find enjoyment and value in the little plot lines in your life. And sometimes, it doesn't need to be a massive, crazy story in order to be a compelling and real one. There are many indie movies and comedies and, sitcoms that are thoroughly enjoyable and rewarding and valuable, perhaps even incredibly so. And there's a bunch of, major, try hard epic films that just totally flop. So it's like, it's not about, is it big or is it small, but is it truthful? All right. Is it truthful? Is it real? Is it something that you can really connect to yourself and be willing to step into to flesh out the nuance and meaning in your life? The master key here is to just recognize that you are the main character in your story, and your life is going to have many different plot lines. Some of them are going to be very epic, and you're going to have to play that role of like the superhero who, goes from, nobody to like super powerful individual. But you're also going to have these more mundane kind of like Seinfeld-esque plot lines where it's a little thing and it's funny, and it's like, it might actually be infuriating and challenging and have, offer just as much opportunity for transformation, but it's going to be done in a humorous way that carves away, the unhelpful big parts of your ego. So the key here is you want to be balanced. You want to make sure that your ego is right in the middle. It's just accurate. That's where you want your ego to be. You don't want it to be gone. You don't want it to be huge. You don't want it to be too small. You just want it to be accurate. You want it to be, this is where I am. This is my proper conception of myself. And that's what a story always does, is that it informs and shifts your perception of yourself. Some cases, it means like, wow, I'm actually way stronger than I thought I was initially. And I learned that through overcoming this big, hard challenge. But in some instances, it's like, oh, wow, I'm not as hot as shit as I thought I was. And I learned that through this kind of humbling event that has left me better. Because the more accurate your perception of yourself is, the better you're going to be able to live, because the better you're going to be able to interact with the world, because you know who you are, you know what your limitations, you know your capabilities, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what a story always does. So identify the plot lines that you're in and make sure you're playing the right character. We're all always going to be playing different kind of roles and different kind of characters in our life. And if you can break down where you're at in yours, then you can play the part much better. So let me know in the comments below what plot lines you're needing to engage in your life. Do you need to have an epic story be told? Do you need to step up and be that big hero? Or do you maybe need to humble yourself a little bit and play the comedy card a little bit, learn how to engage in your own little indie film where you have this kind of awakening of who you are in greater clarity. So let me know. That's pretty much what I got for you guys here today. Hope you found this interesting. Stay sharp. I'll see you in the next one.